$850,000. Received. Richard shoved the phone screen inches from my face, the blue light reflecting in his manic, triumphant eyes. He smirked. That tight, superior grin that I had hated since I was 6 years old, the grin that said he had won a game I didn't even know we were playing. "It's done," he announced, his voice booming off the timber walls of my living room. "The cabin is sold. The money is in my account." I stood there, my coffee mug halfway to my mouth, the steam curling into the cold morning air of the high desert. "It's mine," I said, my voice low but steady. "You can't." He didn't let me finish. He didn't argue. He didn't debate. He swung. Crack. The slap connected with the side of my face with a force that knocked my head back and rattled my teeth. It was an open-handed strike, dismissive and violent, designed not just to hurt, but to humiliate. I tasted copper instantly. My lip had split, warm blood filling the corner of my mouth. He grabbed my shoulder, his fingers digging into my sweater, looming over me with the confidence of a man who has never been told no in his entire life. His face was red, sweating, veins bulging in his neck. "I'm your father," he screamed, spit flying. "I own you. Obey me." Before I tell you what happened the moment those police sirens cut through the silence, and the secret I was holding in my back pocket that would destroy him, drop a comment. What's the worst thing a family member has ever tried to take from you? I'm reading every single one. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't cower. I just touched my lip, looking at the bright red blood on my fingertips, and then looked back at him. Richard expected tears. He expected me to beg, to plead, to crumble like I always had when I was a child. He expected the terrified little girl who used to hide in the closet when he lost money at the track. But I wasn't a child anymore. My name is Samantha, and I am 29 years old. I make my living as a landscape architect. I spend my days analyzing terrain, calculating drainage, and building retaining walls that stop entire mountains from sliding into the sea. I know how to spot a structural failure long before the crack appears on the surface. And Richard? He had been a crumbling foundation my entire life. I smiled at him. It wasn't a happy smile. It was cold, sharp, and entirely empty of affection. I checked my watch. 20 minutes ago, before their car had even pulled into the long gravel driveway, before they invaded my sanctuary, I had made a call. A silent call. I dialed 911 and left the line open, whispering, trespassing and imminent threat before sliding the phone under the couch cushion. Caleb's security system had been triggered the moment Richard's luxury sedan crossed the property line, recording every word, every movement, every threat to a cloud server Richard couldn't touch. He thought he had won. He thought the money sitting in his bank account made him powerful. But he didn't know that I had been waiting for this. I had been waiting for him to cross the line from simple cruelty to federal criminality. Selling my house without my permission wasn't just bad parenting. It was wire fraud. It was grand larceny. And he had just confessed to it on a recorded line. I didn't stop him. I let him sign the papers. I let him hit send. I let him dig his own grave, because I knew it was the only way to bury him for good. You might wonder why I didn't just change the locks earlier. Why I let him keep a key. Why I let him think he still had control over my life. It's because I know Richard. I know his operating system. He believes that because he gave me life, he owns my life. He views his children not as people, but as assets, resources to be mined when his gambling debts pile up. If I had changed the locks, he would have broken a window. If I had blocked his number, he would have shown up at my job and made a scene. He doesn't see boundaries. He sees challenges. To stop a man like Richard, you can't just build a wall. You have to let him walk into a trap he thinks is a victory. You have to let him think he is the smartest person in the room right up until the moment the handcuffs click. The sirens were growing louder now. A wailing chorus rising from the valley floor, shaking the thin walls of the cabin. I looked at Richard, his face twisting from triumph to confusion as the red and blue lights began to flash against the windows, painting the room in violence. But my mind was already somewhere else, drifting back to the conversation that had started this entire nightmare. It was 3 weeks ago. I was standing in my kitchen, holding a phone that felt heavy, like a grenade with the pin pulled. Susan was on the other end, crying. Not the soft, sad tears of a mother who misses her child, but the hysterical, hyperventilating sobbing she used as a weapon. "Richard needs help, Samantha," she wailed. "He's in trouble, real trouble." She told me about the debt. $200,000 owed to Silver State Holdings. She didn't use the words loan shark, but I knew what they were. I knew Richard had a gambling problem that had eaten away at our family finances for decades. I knew he had been bleeding money for years, chasing the high of a big win that never came, leveraging every asset he could touch. But then she dropped the real bomb. The rest of the money, the $650,000 he was desperate to get his hands on, wasn't just to pay off the sharks. It wasn't to save their own house or pay for medical bills. It was for Brittany. My sister was getting married. Not at a local church or a nice hotel, but at a historic chateau in France. A royal wedding for the golden child. A week-long affair with champagne towers, designer gowns, and a guest list of 300 people they wanted to impress. You have to help us, Susan had pleaded, her voice shifting from sorrow to demand. You have the cabin. You don't even use it that much. It's just sitting there in the middle of nowhere. You could sell it. Pay off your father's debt. And give your sister the wedding she deserves. I remembered the cold knot in my stomach. The familiar feeling of being asked to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Mom, that cabin is my home. I live there. It's the only thing I own. But Brittany deserves this. She had snapped, her voice suddenly sharp, the tears vanishing instantly. She's always been the special one. You know that. You have a good job. You're smart. You can get another house. Don't be selfish, Samantha. Don't ruin this for her. Selfish. The word echoed in my head as the police pounded on the door. I looked at my mother now, huddled in the corner of the living room, her eyes wide with terror as the reality of the situation crashed down on her. She had been willing to sacrifice my home, my security, my entire life, just to keep up appearances, just to make sure Brittany got her fairy tale ending while I footed the bill. She had gaslighted me for years, convincing me that my role in the family was to give, and their role was to take. The front door burst open, splintering at the frame. 2 men in cheap, ill-fitting suits marched into my living room like they owned the place. They didn't even knock. They just walked in, followed closely by Richard and Susan. I was still sitting at the kitchen table, a half-eaten piece of toast in my hand, staring at them in disbelief. One of the men, heavy-set, smelling of stale cigarette smoke, pulled out a tape measure and started running it along the wall, ignoring me completely. The other began tapping on my hardwood floorboards with the toe of his scuffed shoe. We'll need to rip this out, he muttered to Richard. Maybe put in laminate. It's cheaper to maintain for a rental unit. Excuse me? I said, standing up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. What do you think you're doing? Richard didn't even look at me. He was standing by the fireplace, gesturing grandly to the buyers, acting the part of the magnanimous lord of the manor. Ignore the clutter, he said, waving a dismissive hand at my life. My books, my drafting table, the quilt I had made by hand. The current tenant is messy, but she'll be out by noon. Tenant. He called me a tenant in my own home. He was erasing my ownership with a single word. Susan bustled in behind him, carrying a box of heavy-duty trash bags. She didn't look at me either. She walked straight to my bookshelf, the custom oak one Caleb had built for me as a housewarming gift, and started pulling down my collection of landscape architecture journals. These were expensive, rare books I used for my work. She swept them into a black garbage bag, like they were fallen leaves. Mom, stop. I stepped forward, my voice rising. Richard stepped in my path, blocking me with his shoulder, using his size to intimidate me. Let your mother work, he growled. We need to clear this out, Susan said, her voice high and frantic, her hands moving with a manic energy. She grabbed a framed photo of me and Caleb from the mantel, a picture from a hiking trip where we were genuinely happy, and dropped it into the bag. I heard the glass shatter. She didn't flinch. It looks cluttered. Brittany hates clutter. She wants the listing photos to look open and airy. My phone buzzed on the table, vibrating violently against the wood. The screen lit up with a text from Brittany. Dad said he sold the cabin. OMG, finally. Transfer the wedding deposit as soon as possible. The venue is holding it until 5 p.m. Don't make me wait. I looked from the glowing phone screen to my mother, stuffing my career into a garbage bag, to my father, selling my home out from under me to strangers who wanted to replace my hardwood with plastic. The audacity was breathtaking. They weren't just stealing from me. They were erasing me. They were dismantling my life, piece by piece, right in front of my eyes, to build a stage for Brittany. And the worst part? They expected me to thank them for the privilege of being the foundation they walked on. Richard slammed a stack of papers onto the table, right on top of my breakfast. The sound was like a gunshot in the small room. Sign this, he commanded. He wasn't asking. He wasn't requesting. He was ordering, the way one orders a dog to sit. It was an acknowledgement of sale. A document stating I agreed to vacate the property immediately and transfer ownership to Blue Sky Investment Group. I looked at the paper, the black ink blurring slightly, then looked up at him. No, I said. I'm not signing anything. This is my house. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that made the buyers look up from their measurements. You think you have a choice? He reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out another document. He held it up, showing me the signature at the bottom. Power of attorney, he announced, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Signed by you 3 years ago. I already signed the deed for you. I'm your father. I have rights. I know what's best. I stared at the document. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. I had never signed a power of attorney. I had never given him legal authority over anything. I looked closer at the signature. It was a crude imitation of my own. The loops were too wide. The slant was all wrong. It looked like something practiced on a napkin. He had forged it. He was committing a felony right in front of me. So confident in his control. So arrogant in his belief that I would never challenge him. That he didn't even care if I knew. He thought I was too weak to do anything about it. I looked directly at the spine of the encyclopedia on the shelf, where the tiny black lens of the hidden camera was recording every frame. Are you confirming you signed my name without my consent? I asked. My voice clear, loud, and steady. I needed him to say it. I needed the audio to be perfect. Richard sneered, leaning over the table, invading my personal space. I'm confirming I did what had to be done. He pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. Transfer initiated. He looked at the buyers. A wide, salesman smile plastering onto his face. It's done. The money is moving. The buyers grinned, shaking his hand vigorously. Pleasure doing business, Richard. The crime was locked. He had done it. He had sold my home. The buyers cheered, clapping Richard on the back. Congratulations, one of them said, already looking around the room as if measuring where to put his own furniture. That was a smooth transaction. Richard was beaming, the flush of victory high on his cheeks. He looked like a man who had just won the lottery. He turned to me, ready to gloat, ready to tell me to pack my bags and get out. But I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I reached under my placemat and pulled out a single sheet of paper I had placed there an hour ago. You didn't sell my house, Richard, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the celebration like a knife through silk. You sold nothing. I slid the document across the table. It slid over the forged papers he had brought, covering them up. It was a recorded deed, stamped and certified by the county clerk just 3 days ago. The official seal was embossed in gold. I transferred the property last week, I explained, watching the confusion cloud his eyes. It doesn't belong to me anymore. It now belongs to the Ironclad Sanctuary Trust, a non-profit land trust I established to protect the local wildlife and preserve the high desert landscape. The room froze. Applause died. The buyers stared at the quitclaim deed, then at Richard, then at their phones still showing the wire transfer. He had just sold a house he did not own. I no longer owned it either. The property belonged to an irrevocable trust he could not touch. Richard had committed wire fraud against men who looked perfectly capable of collecting their losses. That's impossible, he whispered, shaking. You can't just take it. I did, I said. You sold what wasn't yours. The investors turned vicious in an instant. One stepped forward. Where's our money? Richard panicked, sputtering excuses. Too late. The trap had sprung. The $850,000 he bragged about was now evidence. Federal evidence. His face collapsed as he realized it. He lunged at me, snarling. I own you. The police burst in seconds later, tackling him to the floor. He screamed for them to arrest me, calling me a liar. But no one listened. His mask was gone, just a frightened bully flailing in a kitchen he no longer controlled. Susan grabbed my arm, begging me to stop it. To think of family. I pulled free and wiped blood from my lip. I'd like to press charges, I said. Assault, trespassing, and fraud. The officers hauled him away as the investors fled. Susan crumpled, sobbing. Then a black SUV blocked the driveway. Caleb stepped out calm, controlled, and handed me an envelope. The transfer is complete. You own the note. Inside was the original $200,000 debt Richard owed the loan sharks. I had bought it, using every dollar I'd saved. When the police shut him down, I made sure the debt attached to me instead of the criminals. I walked to the squad car and held the paper up to the window. You don't just owe them anymore, I told him. You owe me. And I collect. I promised to lean everything he still possessed. Brittany's dream wedding? Gone. His future? Held hostage by the daughter he tried to ruin. Months later, alone in the cabin, peace finally settled. Richard waited for trial. Susan sold their home. Brittany cursed me through the phone until I blocked her. I sipped coffee from a mug that read, Landlord. Breathing clean desert air. I sent my father to prison and used his own debt to strip him of everything he tried to take from me. Too harsh? Or exactly what he deserved?